Hi, I'm Jillian and welcome to the show. I offer spiritual growth for the rebel soul, guiding you through the labyrinth of your own ascension path. This show is for the rebel souls that challenge the status quo, those that crave authenticity in every single aspect of their lives, that desire to embrace their uniqueness, follow their passions, connect to their soul, and live according to who they truly are, even if that means having the courage to go against the grain or the norms of society. If that's you, my spiritual soul seeker, rebel warrior, then this is the place for you. On this podcast, we speak about everything from spirituality, sexuality, conscious relationships, business, and literally everything in between. So if that's your jam, then stay tuned. And go on, be a rebel and subscribe. You know you want to. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about something that shows up constantly in my work with my clients, and something that has also happened again and again in my own life and my business. And that is the cycle of death, initiation, the void, and rebirth. So if you're someone who is spiritually aware, if you are stepping into a deeper level of purpose in your life, then you are gonna experience these cycles more than most people. And the problem is that when they actually happen, most people think that something's gone wrong in their life. Like, they start thinking things like, oh my God, why am I feeling just so lost all of a sudden? Everything was on such a high, and now I just don't know what direction to go in my life, what to move in my business. Like, my business feels stagnant. Why has my motivation disappeared? Why do I feel like I've just outgrown parts of myself, but I don't really kind of know what comes next? But this is what I've realized after doing years and years of this work, both personally and with my clients, is that these experiences, these cycles that we have as human beings that are on their evolutionary path, they're signs that something is transforming. It's not a sign that something's gone wrong. They're actually the bigger pattern to true spiritual evolution and transformation in your life, because we're not meant to stay stuck. We are here to evolve, just like the cycles evolve, just like, winter moves into spring and summer and autumn, so do we. And like I said, if you are on your spiritual growth journey, if you are intuitive, if you have a soul-led business specifically, then you are going to go through these patterns, these cycles, time and time again. And this is why you're going to notice that maybe other people in your life that maybe aren't as tuned in or tapped in as you don't seem to go through the things that you go through. But the reason that you do is because your soul has chosen to grow and evolve. And sometimes that comes through great expansion and motivation and excitement and clarity. And sometimes that comes through disappointment and pain and confusion. So I'll call it the cycle of transformation, right? This is where we go from death to initiation, to this feeling of being in the void, the in-between, to then coming out anew, this renewal and rebirth. And you'll find that this cycle is not new. You see it in mythology, you see it in so many spiritual traditions, you see it in our world, like with the seasons. You see it in shamanic initiations. This is not new. This is an ancient cycle that once you are tapped into it, you can navigate these ups and downs of your journey so much easier. When you are aware of it, you can understand the higher perspective of what's happening to you. And then the biggest place, honestly, where I see it, of course, it's in our spiritual growth journey, but it's also in business. It's definitely been where it's shown up probably most for me and for most of my private clients. Because you are evolving so fast. You're stepping into your purpose, your bigger calling, usually through the vessel that is your business. And that's why it shows up so much. And I have lived through this cycle so many times in my own life that I can see it very, very clearly with my clients. So stage one, right? Stage one is death. This is really where a whole identity kind of ends. This is the first stage. Not obviously like a physical death, but it is the death of our identity, death of belief systems, death of old systems, death of just old versions of ourselves that we can't take into the next. Whatever that is for you, whatever you're calling in, whatever you're here to move into and evolve into next, you can't take that version that used to exist. It just can't continue anymore. You know, there's something probably about the way that maybe you were living, the way that you were working, or the way that you were just showing up in the world that is this is telling you that it no longer fits. So for me, the earliest version of this probably started when I was a lot younger. You know, as a kid, I was incredibly sensitive. I could feel everyone's emotions. I could sense people's intentions. I could feel like the tension in my household. Like even when nothing was being said, I could feel tension. You could cut it with a knife. You know, and then there was also moments of my childhood where I would feel these like loving presences around me when I was all alone. And at the time, I didn't quite understand what it all meant. I just knew that I felt things that other people didn't seem to notice. But maybe you can relate to this. That, for me anyway, that level of sensitivity became so overwhelming. Like growing up in environments where, you know, the emotions around you were either really intense or unspoken and suppressed, pretty much meant that I was constantly absorbing everyone else's shit, everyone else's energy around me. And then eventually my body started reacting. In my teens, I developed migraines, insomnia, stomach issues, throat issues, exhaustion. And none of the doctors that I ever went to could explain it at all. They had no idea what the fuck was going on with me. But now I look back and I realize, oh my God, my nervous system was just so overloaded from feeling so much energy that I actually shut it down. And when I shut that down, my intuitive side also went quiet for a while because it kind of had to, right? Like this is how our intuition works through our senses. And if some of the ways that I was receiving psychic information, intuitive information was through my body, my physical sensations, my emotions, it almost like I had to cut that off. This part of me, this sensitive, oversensitive part of me that didn't have any tools to protect her energy or boundaries at that point of my life, I had to shut it down. And that was like probably my first level of identity death. You know, that intuitive, sensitive child who felt everything that kind of had to take a step back from that version because, again, I just didn't have the tools to manage it. And then another death cycle that I went through was later in my life. You know, before I was doing my spiritual work full time, I owned a 7-figure recruitment business. My life looked very, very, very different. Anyone that knows the recruitment world will understand this. So I worked in a very specialist area, which was digital media marketing and technology. So it was a very refined area and a very specialist niche area. But let's just say the environments that I was in, the lifestyle that I had, the pace of work, my social circles at the time, everything was kind of built around that world ultimately. But as my intuitive and healing gifts started getting stronger, my connection with spirit started to deepen, I really kind of realized something pretty uncomfortable. Like that life that I had built, that version of me, that person, the things that I was doing, partying, going out, like the things are quote unquote normal for you know, younger people. It's not normal, firstly. What I realized is that life just didn't match who I was becoming. That next version of me wasn't someone that would go out and drink of a weekend, wasn't someone that worked herself to death, wasn't someone that, you know, didn't prioritize her health or look after herself. My sensitivity to energy was so heightened at that point. Like my awareness of people's intentions, their emotions, that was starting to increase as well. And I realized if I was actually going to step fully into this spiritual work that I was called to do, the healing work, I just couldn't keep living in environments that was constantly pulling my energy in all these different directions that were not in the highest alignment for me. And there was a moment where I realized like I just couldn't, it would have been physically impossible for me, energetically impossible for me to keep one foot in my old life and one foot in my soul work. Like I realized if I was going to answer the call fully, I had to step out of the environments that were draining my energy and really start honoring my own time, my own space, my body and my energy so much differently than I'd ever done before. And that kind of meant leaving my own recruitment business. I know, leaving a business that I had built from the ground up, blood, sweat, and tears. That was a 7-figure, very successful global business that I'd owned for 7.5 years. That I'd moved to the other side of the world from London to Australia to build and scale, build a team, all the things. It meant that I left that. I had to leave that world. It was no longer for me. It meant I had to change my whole entire lifestyle, my friendship group. You know, it really kind of meant I was naturally growing apart from certain friendships, certain environments that just didn't feel aligned for me at all anymore. I kind of went into a bit of a hermit mode just to really understand, okay, well, who am I without this identity? Who am I without being this business owner, without, you know, going out and partying, without, you know, all of these things? Who was I? So I needed to take that time away, and that wasn't always easy because, you know, when an identity dies, parts of your life are going to change with it. But what I will say is that death stage really created space for the next version of my life to fully emerge. And then that's when life starts teaching you. That's when you go into the second stage, which is the initiation. You know, this is where life begins really starting to activate something bigger in you. You know, you start becoming more aware of your gift. You start asking the deeper questions about reality. You know, for me, again, remember I've had lots of these cycles happen throughout my life. But one of the biggest initiation moments happened at the very start when I was probably about 19 years old, when one of my closest friends died suddenly, tragically, in this horrific accident. You know, when something like that happens so young, it really cracks open your whole understanding of reality, like wide open. Then you start asking questions about life, about death, about where people go when they leave this world. And for me, you know, that experience really, and the things that I did experience with that, with her visiting me, with my spirit guides coming to me at that point, it really opened the door to understanding this spirit world in a way that I never had before. And I also know why I needed to have that experience because, again, there's just so much context now to the work that I do. And then another part of my initiation was realizing that my gifts were actually real. You know, like what I had been experiencing all of my life wasn't just my imagination, wasn't something that needed to be dismissed. Because I had intuitive and healing gifts all through my life. You know, when I was a kid, I used to go into my grand's room after she passed away and I would touch all of her belongings and I would just get like these flashes of emotions and images and memories that would come into my awareness. And at the time, of course, I didn't understand what that was. But later on, of course, I realized that that was a thing called psychometry. That was my ability to touch and read the energy of objects that she owned. And I was reading the impressions from that, seeing the memories from her through these objects. You know, again, there were so many moments in my life where I could feel someone's intentions. Like I knew what was going to happen before they even spoke. I could sense all the emotions that were going on, people that were true and not true. Like I was around all these different myriads of emotions and energies growing up that I realized they weren't just like random experiences. They were my intuitive abilities. But again, at the time, you know, it was just pure overwhelm. But then later,
that initiation moved through to my first development of my psychic training, where I started to, I trained in like 11 different modalities over the years, but I first began training as a psychic medium, and my initiation experiences through that experience became really even so much more direct. I remember doing one of my first mediumship readings, and I hadn't learned how to properly clear energy or separate my field from spirit when I was connecting to them. Like, we didn't get taught that, which is why I'm so militant about the energy work as being the foundations for any type of spiritual work. How to clear energy, how to protect your energy, how to do the energetic hygiene things that are so pertinent to being a clear channel for doing any of this work. Because I had to go through things that were not taught to me in the proper way. And I will never allow that to happen to my students. So after that reading, I literally spent the next week with my foot feeling like it was on fire. Like, it literally felt like it was burning. For a whole entire week, I was going through life and work until I went back to class the next week. And I realized that the spirit that I'd been reading had died in a fire, and I hadn't properly disconnected from that energy. So, of course, that experience stayed in my energy field. That was an initiation for me, because life teaching you through experience how energy actually works. That was what was happening. Life was teaching me through my experiences how energy worked. And again, why it's now such a huge part of the work that I do now. And then another moment happened during an aura reading class where I felt a presence literally standing next to me, and I just assumed at that point it was a spirit guide. I knew a little bit about spirit guides, but it wasn't something that I'd consciously worked on at that point. So I literally held its proverbial hand, and I walked it with me to the bathroom before we started class. And then later on, the teacher explained to me that that presence that I'd been interacting with was not a guide. Was not a guide. It was a shapeshifter. And she saw it in my aura because we were doing aura readings. Again, that was an initiation. That initiation for me was learning discernment, was learning energetic boundaries, was learning how to decode what I was inviting in to my space and my energy field. Again, this is why I'm so shit hot on this, and this is why it's like I have to walk through this is part of my makeup. This is part of my human design. I'm a 6'2", right? Which is the hermit and the role model. Tell me a better adaptation of my life. Is like I have to walk through the fire and the flames so then I can show up embodied and teach what I have experienced, right? That's how I work as a teacher. So I've had to go through a lot of different things in my years to be able to hold space and to have a deeper level of understanding about such a myriad of experiences, because that's what my clients are going to be experiencing, right, on different stages. And then we go to stage 3. So we've had the death, we've had the initiation, then we go to the void. Oh, the void, the in-between. And to be fair, a lot of my clients do come to me in the void. That's that space between the versions of you. And they probably come to me in this place because it's kind of the one that people struggle with the most. It's the old version of you that's ended, but the new version of you hasn't quite fully arrived yet. And oh my God, that can feel so incredibly uncomfortable, especially when you don't understand the cycles, when you don't have the higher awareness that this is the cycle that you're currently in. So when you're in this cycle, you might feel tired or just uncertain, like you've just lost all clarity. You could feel like you're just floating between just different versions of yourself almost. And again, I don't escape this. I don't escape the cycles just because I'm aware of them, just because I can navigate them. I do not escape them, because every element of growth and expansion that I go through as a soul, that I go through in my relationships, that I go through in my business and my life, I still go through these cycles. And I experienced one of these again pretty recently in my business. So after launching another round of the Rebel Psychic School, I felt like I'd crashed. You know, the launch energy, it really did require a lot of energy from me. And then when it ended, there was just this like stillness, because for like a month or 6 weeks, I was just doing so much marketing. I was, you know, there was just, I was constantly busy. But then when it ended, there was just kind of like this stillness, right? Because I wasn't launching anything. And then of course, you know, the mind, it kind of wants to jump to, okay, what's next? What do I create next? What do I launch next? What's my next move? What am I offering next? But energetically, I did feel kind of drained, to be honest. I'm not going to lie. That is the void. And I see that all the time with my clients. You know, it's people that feel like they've outgrown their life, their environment, maybe their house, maybe it feels confining for them, their country, their job, like whatever it is. Like they know that they're expanding internally, but their external reality hasn't quite caught up yet. Like that is the in-between space. That is the void. It's not stagnation, what a lot of people think it is. It's actually a space called, it's an integration space. And this is actually the space where you can start to take time to do more of the deeper inner work to reflect. So for me, it was really looking at those parts of me, that identity, the beliefs that I had around launching or working so hard during a launch. You know, and again, this is going to be different for all of you, but that's one of my biggest soul lessons that I continue to work through, that I am here to master at every different phase of my business evolution. So really looking at what worked, what didn't work, why after working so hard I felt so exhausted, what beliefs were still there for me about why I had to work hard. You know, because I cannot take that aspect with me, that workaholic old version of me, because that was my archetype, right? Like, listen, I created a very successful 7-figure recruitment company because I was a workaholic. I was highly ambitious, but I would go through these cycles of burnout. I would go through like 150% and then burnout, 150%. Those were old cycles of how I knew how to work. It was the only way that I knew how to work. And part of how I'm building business now in my spiritual business is to not be in that 3D hustle environment. And of course, you know, I still have to go through the things where sometimes these older parts of me still show up sometimes, right? But having the tools to integrate and shift and change and bring up and heal the parts of me that still felt at times I had to go into that kind of hustle mentality and then feel a bit afterwards. That was my work. That was the work that I was here to do in the void. And for you, you know, it might be more around the fact that maybe you give more than you receive back. It could be that it could be so many different patterns that are showing up, you know, and it doesn't have to be just in your business. If you don't have a business, it could just be in your life or how you are in relationships. Do you have shit boundaries? Are you always feeling used by people? Are you not feeling respected by people? Whatever that is, the void space can kind of feel like that, right? Because again, for me, it's like I cannot take that old 3D hustle mentality into my next level of my business. That is not soul leadership. Like you just can't. So obviously it was coming up for me for a reason, because it needed to be traversed and moved through. So again, just notice the patterns that you see when you're in this void phase, because that is the work. This is the surrender. This is the trust phase. You know, and I'm certainly not immune to the work because I go through these cycles more than most people. That's why I can see them so well. That's why I can help my clients navigate them so well. And then when we do that inner work, well, we notice the things that we need to clear and shift, and the new frequencies that we need to step into, the new identities, the new versions of ourselves. And this is the stage that I take a lot of my clients through with the belief work, the identity work. This is when we get to the rebirth. This is stage 4. This is when the new version of ourself emerges. This is when something starts to shift. This is when your energy starts to kind of come back. This is when you start to get like more clarity, more creative. have more ideas start to pop up. And then you realize that you're stepping into a new version of yourself. The biggest thing that I see people do in the void is try to take action from a place of fear. Like, oh my God, I'm not feeling anything, or I'm not moving, or I'm not launching, or I'm not, doing this. And they try to take an action that is not aligned out of fear. Because again, the trust and surrender and sometimes the not doing or doing the inner work can be hard. But when you do that, the new version of you arrives, and then you just start getting all this clarity, right? So for me, rebirth really meant a few things, right? It meant my gifts returning. Instead of just feeling energy unconsciously, I became someone that could intentionally read energy, communicate with spirit, guide people through their healing, and then teach the psychic development, teach people how to become their own soul-led leader. And then that eventually led me to creating the Rebel Psychic School, where I now teach people how to develop their intuitive and psychic abilities themselves. None of that would have been possible if I tried to hold on to my old life. Like, it just wouldn't have been possible. Because every rebirth requires letting something go first. And like now, with my business, it's the same. It's like I needed to let go of that old version that still believed she had to hustle. She had to do more to receive more. The part that maybe never felt safe. That was the work that I had to do. And then comes the space, the clarity of like, the inspiration, the motivation of like, this is the focus for me next. This is what I want to offer out to the world. This is where I really want to help my next level of clients. This is the offer that I want to put out. And the next phase then comes with ease. It doesn't come with the hustle. It comes with the invitation. That's what it's about. And like I said, this cycle doesn't happen just once. It happens time and time again as we grow. And I'm in it now, right? I can feel myself moving through another version of myself right now. And it's not really funny, because all of my private clients mirror me. So the majority of my private clients at the moment are all business clients. They all have their own business. And they are moving through their own cycles too. Their void to the rebirth cycles. So I always see mirrors in my clients, like very different experiences, but also very similar cycles. And, as my personal work expands, I step into a deeper level of leadership. There's identity shift happening. For my clients, the same thing. They're stepping into new versions of leadership, new versions of what lights their soul, new ideas, new ways of creativity, ways of doing things that they never even thought was possible before. But when they trust their intuition, when they start to connect with their soul, it starts to unfold their deeper purpose, their deeper calling, the way they're meant to do business that aligns with their passions, that aligns with their talents, their gifts, their skills, and their bigger calling, like who they're here to serve. And that's so different for all of my clients. I have healers, I have coaches, I have intuitives, I have other intuitive business leaders that have other types of services, products in the wellness industry, the beauty industry, the technology industry. Everyone's different, but the thing that they all go through is cycles. The thing that they all are is extremely intuitive. The thing that they all are growth mindset and focused on their bigger spiritual evolution. And what they're here to create is unique to their own path. And for me, it's like the version of me who built the earlier stages of my work is not the same version that is going to lead the next level of it. There's new levels of responsibility that I'm calling in. There's new levels of impact that I'm calling in. There's new levels of wealth and abundance. There's new levels of visibility. This is my next level, right? The glass ceiling, we're moving through that. And every time that happens, there's another layer of evolution that is required. There's another identity that we have to grow into. another old way of operating that needs to fall away. And that could be, again, so different for everyone. It could be the fact that you give too much and don't receive, you don't ask for help, you have terrible boundaries, you're accepting less than from your partner, like so many things, you're working too hard, like all of these things can show up. You're procrastinating, whatever it is for you. And, for me, I can feel it happening for me right now. I'm in it. There's moments where I feel the expansion of what I'm here to do in this next phase. And there are moments when I'm navigating that in-between space, because the next version of leadership is still landing for me, right? But one thing I have learned through all of these cycles is you don't rush the rebirth. Like, you can't rush the rebirth. And when you do try to rush the rebirth, you will ultimately end up making decisions that are not aligned with you. And that almost forces you back, because you're like, okay, you've not really learned the lesson here. You've not really integrated the soul lesson here. You've not attuned to the cycles of your life. Because the next version of you doesn't emerge through forcing or pushing or pressure or fear, none of that. That next identity, that next version of you, it's going to emerge through a deeper alignment, having the time to integrate. And the biggest thing that comes up with me and all of my clients is trust. And that is exactly the space that, again, so many of my clients I work with are in, especially those that are building soul-led businesses or stepping into bigger leadership in their life, in their relationships, in their work, because they are here to do some big things, and you cannot do that when you're holding on to the old versions of yourself. And that's why cycles are so important. So if you are currently in a season where things kind of feel uncertain, where your old version of your life just doesn't quite fit anymore, where you feel like something inside you is 100% shifting, but you still don't know what comes next, then it might not be that you're lost or just no hope, or you're just in this phase. It could just be that you're in the middle of one of these transformation cycles. Because again, the biggest expansions that I see in our lives always begins with an ending. And like I said, this is actually a huge part of the work that I do with my private coaching clients. Within the path, which is my coaching container, we work so much with these cycles, because again, when someone is building a business that is aligned with their soul work, they will go through multiple deaths, initiations, void phases, rebirths, and navigating those cycles well will completely change the trajectory of your life and your business. So inside the path, like, we work with things like identity shifts. We step into next levels of leadership. We clear the energetic patterns that are keeping someone stuck. We understand the deeper spiritual cycles behind their life, their relationships, their business. We are strengthening their own spiritual gifts, their intuition, their psychic abilities, their energy abilities, so they can make the most aligned decisions from a place of truth and love instead of fear. Because when you understand what cycle you're in, you can really stop forcing things that aren't ready yet. Because there is things called divine timing, and force, it completely blocks the divine timing. This is when you start moving through your transformation with a bit more ease, with understanding, with clarity, instead of like fighting it. So if this episode resonated with you, the path might be the right place. All the details are going to be in my bio below, and I am sending you so much love, because if the old version of your life is no longer fitting, then it might mean that your next life is just trying to be born.